Buddy, we're just gonna get started a little bit early today. I want to make sure that everything is working. I've got the giveaway system up and running, and I want to make sure that that's working. And I don't have a lot of time today, so I wanted to just kind of get rolling and then let people join in. I think a couple people, Johnny and Story, and I'm not sure who else may be showing up in just a bit. So we'll talk with them as soon as they get here. For now, though, I just want to make sure to welcome everybody. And there we go. Make sure that the battler view is working as well. I think it's up and running, and people can now join it. Oh, I got to get my mouse in the correct spot. So how's it going, guys? Hey, Midnight Oil. I've been catching your streams lately. They've been popping up. It's interesting stuff. I've always wanted to build a card game, so I think it kind of catches my interest a lot. We did some changes to the giveaway battler yesterday and added in a couple camera fixes. I think it's a couple versions old. Some of the new stuff was on a different system and I think didn't get committed and is just kind of in a lost and broken state. So it's a semi-old version of it, but everybody who types in chat essentially will get entered. I think it does. This is the one without the requirement for the exclamation mark. So if you're here with us live, somebody will win a prize. And I actually figured out, I think I know what the prize is going to be. I'll talk about it and announce it a little bit later on in the show. So let's see what we've got going on in chat. I just want to kind of start there. Oh, Path says they're working on a character AI for a bit, and they're a little bit nervous about that is kind of blowing up. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about today is what's going on with all of the AI stuff. If you guys haven't seen it yet, the Nvidia keynote at Computex was, just 3 days ago, it looks like now. And they announced enough stuff that their stock basically doubled overnight. So it went from like 200 to 400 overnight or somewhere close to that. And it was because of their big advancements. It seems like they're not just doing hardware, but they are doing a lot of hardware. They've got like this. They got a new AI supercomputer systems that they're selling now and making available to people and to companies. And I guess Microsoft's even making their older one available on the cloud services. But on top of all that, one of the things, or many of the things they announced, are all these different bits of software. So they've got AI doing stuff like ray tracing to improve the performance of ray tracing. They said it was, I think, predicting for every pixel drawn, it was predicting 7 more. So obviously a pretty huge improvement in ray tracing stuff. Oh, no, I want to check the chat too and see if anybody, and make sure that I'm keeping up on it. If you, if you saw anything in this one too that you think is really cool, let me know, and just make sure that I'm keeping up in both sides. So a lot of stuff trying to get this all figured out. Let's turn on, the chat overlay kind of squeezes in a lot of the screen. Maybe it'll work for a minute. They're working on NPCs and an RPG that use a pipeline of transformer components to converse with players. So yeah, one of the things that they showed here, and let me, I'm gonna get the chat off here. I don't like the way that really looks. It just eats up too much of the screen. One of the things that they showed was the NPCs in here. If I can find it, it's a very, very long keynote. It's two hours of stuff. Why does this one not have chapters? Maybe I just need a refresh. Just digging through till I find it. But essentially what it was NPCs, like AI for NPCs in a video game where you're giving them some prompts and some info about their backstory, and then it's talking to players. Kind of A lot of like what some of the other AI solutions that we've seen have been kind of providing lately for game devs, where you hook up an NPC and then it calls out and does some stuff. And it looks like what they've done is add a service for it. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time finding it in here though, or why this window is just not playing either. Let's refresh. It's just my window is totally broken, and all of my chapters that I was seeing before, I'm not seeing now. Hey, there's Johnny home. Let's pop Johnny in here. Didn't get a notification. Hey, Johnny, how's it going?
Hello. Good. How you doing, Jason?
Oh, I can't hear you. Hold on. It's probably not you. It's probably me. I probably have the audio output source that has something ridiculous on this.
Yeah, I see
system.
my
Give
little.
me 1 second. Yeah, it's
see my
going
meter
to
going.
headphones that don't exist. So let's try that. All right, you there, Johnny?
Yes, sir.
All right, I can hear you. Hopefully there's no feedback now. All right. All right. I'm trying out this new setup, so just trying to get things kind of loosely work. There we go. That looks much better. Yeah,
Nice.
loosely working here. I've got my microphone is just sitting here. It's like stuck to the arm, but it won't attach to the table because the table's too thick. So I just kind of like sitting there on the arm with it wedged up on the power brick for the laptop to hold it in place.
Nice,
yeah.
Nice.
It's a perfect setup. Cool. Yeah, it looks like everybody can hear both of us. That's good. So I'm gonna keep looking through here for this part. I was trying to find the AI generative stuff from the Nvidia keynote, but I was curious, did you get a chance to watch any of this or see any of the highlights from what
Not
they
at
announced?
all. No. I've been just kind of heads down working on some stuff, so haven't had a chance to check this out at all.
Oh, okay. Well, I wish it would play. I don't know why I can't get it to play. To talk really briefly about it. Essentially, they released some new AI supercomputer systems that they said were, I think, 500 times faster than the other ones. They've been selling them to all the Fortune 500 companies now. But they also, let's see if I can find it. They started talking about all of their AI software, and there's a lot of it. The first part, the thing I mentioned earlier, was some stuff with the ray tracing. So they did some improvements with AI where it was able to predict 2 pixels for every pixel, or 7 pixels for every one that they drew, which seemed like, at least they made it sound like it gave a huge performance improvement, which it seems like it would. I don't know why this thing will not play. I'm gonna try to force it to play. But they also they have this whole Omniverse setup. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah,
and it's now able, or it looks like in the near future, I wish I could show the video, able to use AI to like actually build stuff out in there. I don't know why it won't play. I'm gonna try installing Chrome or something. But there we go. There's Mr. Story. But essentially, the way that they showed it was they've got like things like a floor plan that they pull in from some sort of a document, a CAD file or something, and then they tell it to generate a warehouse based off of this floor plan. And it goes, and then gives you the 3D model of the warehouse. Obviously, I think that the one that they showed there was not the real thing, because they were talking about it coming in the near future. So I assume they kind of faked it there, but I assume it's also going to happen really soon. And they had a lot of really cool functionality for just swapping and changing things in there. And they had a lot of the text to video stuff. Seems like Nvidia essentially was working on a lot of the things that a lot of the startups are working on, but they're also kind of partnering with a lot of them as well. So I don't know, there's a lot there, but I apparently just cannot get this to play. Maybe it'll show in the even the blog post won't render right. How's it going, Story?
Good. I've winding down on some work that's been keeping me a bit stressed, for lack of a better word. So now we're good.
Nice. Getting some free time finally. Did you get a chance to play Zelda?
I played for probably 15 minutes, which means I nearly got out of the opening tutorial section. Ugh. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I've been trying, and every time I start getting it installed, I get pulled away. So I've tried 4 times so far to get it set up, and every time I either hit a roadblock and get pulled away. Yeah, I cannot play videos, or something else. But I'm gonna go for it again this weekend. But Nvidia Ace for Games was the thing that they announced as their generative AI for NPCs in games, which makes it kind of reminds me of like the in-world ones and some of the other AI NPC stuff that you've seen out there. And I'm curious, like, do you guys? It seems to me that like a lot of the big players think that this stuff is going to be huge and is going to drastically change games. And I mean, I think that in the short term, it's probably not immediately going to be super usable, but my guess is that 5 years down the road, it could very well become like just the standard way that you set up NPCs, and the idea
and
of
that sounds horrifying. Why do people want this? Like, it's
Well, just to clarify,
that argument. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Just to clarify real quick, what does this NVIDIA Ace exactly do? Is this like kind of like dialogue based for NPCs?
Yes. So it's you give the NPC like a backstory and some info about the world, and then you can talk to it naturally, just like the kind of like the chat bots that you've seen with Chat GPT and Unity, where you hop in and talk to it and it tries to act natural. Yeah, so that's essentially the problem that they're one of the many problems that they were kind of presenting a solution for. And I don't know how their solution compares to the kind of the indie ones that I've seen, or the smaller startups that have kicked off doing that. But I think that the fact that they think that it's going to be a big thing and are pushing it, and that Unity is also kind of doing the same. I mean, John talked about that quite a bit at GameDev Guild. I wonder if that's going to just drastically change it. And I mean, Jason, it seems like you think that that's a horrible idea, but I wonder if it really is a horrible idea, or if there's a way to make it good, like where you can make it so that the storytelling and content creation is good and fluid and kind of bug free, but still kind of like makes sense from a storyteller. Like you can tell who wrote the story and all that kind of stuff.
I think like to divide, like I think the words are very cautious here. Like you said earlier, this will change gaming. I don't disagree. I think it will fundamentally change gaming. In the same way, open world as a concept changed gaming. Did it improve gaming? That's a very different conversation and argument. I think it's pretty clear that the expectations for a baseline game these days is it should be bigger. It should have more content. And what a game is expected to be is often quite large, and the amount of freedom a player is expected to have is quite a lot. And that all sounds good on paper, but you end up with a lot of IKEA simulators. And as much as I like Zelda, it is another IKEA simulator, right? And that's the problem I have isn't to say that, like, I don't think it's bad that this kind of tech exists. The problem is once you start doing stuff like this, it starts to become the baseline, and it starts to completely bleed in to other things. Like, it still blows my mind that of every game franchise in the entire world, Zelda is literally the monomyth. The original core Zelda is a story. It is the definitional singular story of a hero who goes on an adventure to save the day. It is a story-driven adventure. The entire premise of Zelda as a character, and same with Mario to a degree, is a one-note concept of a hero who goes on an adventure and has a multi-act structure. Of all of the games to make open-ended, the most quintessential narrative-driven sequential story doesn't seem like the one I would personally pick to turn into an open world experience. And that kind of just shows what I mean, is everything's open to becoming an open world. And in the same way, once you do this, everything is open to adding more AI characters. And you end up with the Library of Babel problem, where if you had a library where every single book had every single combination of every single word, theoretically, you could find any book that would be a whole collection of words in order. But is it useful to you? I would rather a library of 20 well-chosen books of very particular to what I need to learn than I would a library of infinite information. And if you give me a game full of infinite characters with infinite generation, there's no content anymore. It's just the Library of Babel all over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of the big concern is that if you put them in and then they're just kind of open ended, you could just have random conversations and never really get to the story. But that's what I'm wondering if like you know, when these systems start to get a little bit more mature, if they're going to be able to kind of still point the player towards the story and redirect them and prevent that kind of that nonsense. So, I mean, if you made it somewhat realistic, if you just stood there and started randomly talking to somebody and just keep asking them stupid questions, eventually, very quickly, they're probably going to just find a real quick reason to leave and stop talking to you. So I wonder if there are mechanics like that and things that will minimize that kind of stuff.
But again, even
I
that comes
assume
back
somebody's
to
going to come up with stuff. Go ahead.
like a lot of the arguments come down to, yeah, but now we can make stuff really realistic. It's like, well, the other thing too. Why do we assume realism is an ultimate good in video games? Anybody who's ever designed a video game has made a jump, and if you've ever made a jump that's a realistic jump, it's the worst thing in the entire world. Human beings jump
Yeah, I can get
terribly.
like my 3 inches off the ground. What are you talking
Yeah.
about?
So this idea that like we can get closer to how real, like as you said, real conversations. I don't want real conversations. I want conversations that are designed for story. Like it's the same thing with like guns. Anyone who's ever seen real guns versus guns in movies, that's not how they work. Guns in movies are very different. There's no such thing as explosions in space, but we are conditioned that media is meant to give us different perceptions based on what it's meant to achieve. And at the end of the day, games are experiential in nature. They are designed to give you an experience. And so the way you design it should be tailored to improve the experience you're giving. It should not be realism. And if I'm tailoring an experience to give me a better experience, letting random AI, and I don't even blame the AI. The AI isn't going to be bad. I'm blaming the person because the person is going to yes and their way to unfun mechanics. It's the same reason why you don't have overpowered weapons in games, because a player will go, oh cool, I'll just use this painfully unfun mechanic and like cheese my way to the end of the game. They're not trying to have an unfun experience, but if you give them the tools to have an unfun experience, they will do it. And if you give people games where they can unfun themselves out of it, they will do that. And I think AI will allow people to unfun themselves out of a lot of experiences.
That's fair. So you think it's going to be more like a fad that everybody jumps on for a few years and then a lot of people start to realize kind of sucks and goes away?
No, no, I don't think it will at all. I think it's going to become the new de facto standard, and we're going to end up with another universe of towers. Like again, look at the trend of AAA games, right? There was cover shooters, which had knee-high walls. Every game needed to have knee-high walls. Then we moved into the open world era, and then well, actually, no, we had the zombie era where every game had to have a zombie mode. Then we had the open world era, and now the open world era, everything has to have towers, and so now you have to climb some tower to look around to get a better scope, to get all the icons on your map, to go chase icons. The next phase is going to be every game is going to need 500 NPCs that can all talk about their favorite cheese flavors, and you're going to have this infinite sea of pointless conversations. And then a meme meta is going to come up where you're going to have people run around talking to the AI, asking them stupid questions and seeing how fast you can get them to do dumb things or break stuff. And suddenly the games won't be about the games anymore. They'll be about the what can you get the AI to say in certain areas, and there'll be like speedrun stuff, and suddenly it'll become meme structures, and then there'll be a return to form where people get fed up with this and want to go back to games which are more structured. But that'll probably take about 12 years, and by that stage I don't know if I'll still be playing games. So
what if it turns a different route though, and instead of the AI just constantly like kind of staying as it is and people going off on these random paths, if the AI instead is not just generating the dialogue, but then bringing that character in and then like forcing the dialogue towards the story, kind of like it reminds me again of like Star Trek holodeck type crap. Like they go talk to some random character, like sometimes it just becomes like a main character and can become part of the story and push into there. Do you guys think that the systems for not just like AI dialogue, but I guess like AI I don't know how to put it, how to say it another way, but like NPC behavior that's driven by AI that ties into the story and could allow like different NPCs to become part of the story that may or may not have been part of it, or at least to like push and guide you back towards the story and become like a supporting thing. Do you think that's possible in the near future, or like way overboard, like crazy dreamland stuff?
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking a little bit, is like what ways could it be used in a way that's not like so in the player's face. Like I kind of think of like almost like GTA almost when you like, say you're like, drive onto the sidewalk and like nearly hit somebody, you kind of get like after a while of doing that, you kind of get like the same sound bites of like NPCs saying the, same just quick little line of dialogue over and over again. So what if it could just kind of like randomize that a little bit? Like, people get kind of have like, different accents and they say different things depending on, who that NPC is. I think that just could be like kind of a silly way to mix it up a little bit. So again, you're not hearing that like same sound clip over and over and over again.
I'm all for that. I think in general, like flavor text, as you're kind of describing, that sort of stuff is a very good use case for it. The other part, though, that I think is a very big asterisk, and I think people should be careful of, is once you start using AI for game design, like once you start having characters in AI do things, here's my other hot take. People hate that. They don't know they hate that yet, but you're going to find out very soon, once people start actually trying to apply this stuff to game design, that users actually hate good AI. It's been anybody who's ever designed AI of any kind. Good AI is very easy to make, as in like perfect AI. You just give it all of the sense information for exactly where everything is in the world, and it'll have perfect headshots across the map at any given time. Nobody wants that. Fine. The best AI in games are realistically dumb AI. You want AI which is you can engage with at a level that is smart enough to be a challenge, but not so smart that you ever feel like you're being too outplayed. And here's the number one problem with all of this. The hard thing is balancing the motivational triangle. How does a player engage with the world? And how do they feel motivated to continue playing? And AI is really difficult for this because you have to walk that line between how smart is the player versus how smart is the AI. And the real struggle here is in games like Splinter Cell and basically any game where you're sneaking around doing things. We've talked before about how the characters will shout, "I don't see anybody anymore. I guess the coast is clear," and it's like really dumb stuff. And like obviously that's really stupid, but the reason they're doing that has nothing to do with the game, and it's not laziness on the part of the system designers, and it's not. Some people think it's about performance and saving cycles. It's none of these things. It's for you. It is literally shouted at you so that you know my assumptions of the world are in this state. The world does this and is like this. And so if you have a plan, like I'm going to sneak up on those rafters and do this, that, and the other, that it'll work. And this is why you see really bad indie games that are up on itch and stuff. People get frustrated at them because enemies teleport out of nowhere, or I didn't think it could see me, because you don't have an understanding of what the world state is. Now, why do I bring all that up? Because what AI lets you do is have systems that are smarter than we are. And you'll end up with a world where you as a player cannot intuit what the AI is thinking, because it has more parameters to make decisions than you are capable of seeing. And so the point of a good game designer is to telegraph to the player as much information as possible so you can make these decisions in a way that makes the game fun for you. You can make plans and execute the plans. But if we lean too heavily on AI as a decision maker in its own right, yes, you'll get autonomous agents, but you now have a world where nothing's predictable. And that sounds like fun for meme games, but when you get to practical games of actually playing them and making plans and feeling like you're doing things and achieving things, it will suck. And all of a sudden, a load of games will come out which will be really AI powered, and people will be like, I hate this. I feel like I can't tell what's going to happen, and I can't make plans, and I can't do anything because the AI is basically fighting me. And not even it's too smart. It just does things that you can't reliably detect. So I don't know. I see a bit of a pushback on this from a game design perspective coming in the future once more people try to tie it into actual, can you make it fun? Because I don't think many people are thinking about that just yet.
Yeah. I think that could definitely be a problem. I'm curious your thoughts on it from a different perspective outside of the storytelling too, because I think on the storytelling stuff it's going to come down a lot to what that implementation looks like and how much the AI is controlling it versus the other stuff and how that's integrated. But what about on things that are like, say, like a strategy game or a simulation game? Maybe it's like a city simulation thing. Do you think that these systems like the LLMs or just the generative AI stuff, or even just any of the new crap that's coming out is going to drastically kind of impact that? And I know right now dots would be kind of the way to do it and have everything run super fast and write all of the logic. But do you think it'll get to a point where you just kind of go like, hey, I just need a mini brain for all of these million people, or I need you to think as a million different people and have a little bit of context for each of them, and it's able to suddenly do that drastically faster than anything we can write? Do you think that that's gonna? I mean, is that already happening, and I just don't know about it too, or is it gonna become something more? I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, definitely, I think there could be interesting use cases for it. I guess kind of like what Jason's story was saying, like, I mean, even you can kind of see it with social media already with these like contents where it's like, the algorithm is like feeding all this stuff. Like it just kind of feels like a little bit soulless after a while. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure where I wanted to go.
But, well, I guess what if you made like The Sims and gave each NPC its own like AI, like a like an auto GPT style thing? Not obviously not that, but something where it's just constantly thinking it has a routine and plans, and then it's using AI to kind of drive that behavior in its future plans, and then can morph that behavior. Basically like make Free Guy. I don't know if you guys saw that movie.
I did, but I guess here's my question to you: what is the game you're playing in that universe? Like, if you tell me I can press a button and make the most ultimate super simulated game in the world, which is an exact clone of reality, it's like, cool. You've not described a game. You've described outside my front door. What's next? What is the point of doing that system? And it's like, well, you can have NPCs who can live lives. Cool. But I live a life. I want to now play a game. So what's the game I'm playing? And like having NPCs live a life in a game, sure, that could lead to interesting and facilitating different ideas. But again, it should all be to facilitate interesting ideas. And I find that the question of ... AI is very much along the same lines of, crypto. It's like it's a thing. It does stuff. Let's apply it to stuff and see where magic. That's not how you do this. You have to.
But I mean, the AI could. I mean, the game could just be like an RPG, right? It could just be a standard story-driven RPG where there's a bunch of stuff going on, and all of the NPCs are kind of actively doing things and kind of living a more normal life instead of the standard routine of like, I walk to work, I walk to this other place, then I walk to the house, and then I repeat that loop. They could be doing things like somewhat more naturally and kind of growing and evolving throughout, even if they're not like the key parts. But I don't know that that would necessarily make the game better, but it certainly might make it more interesting, and you could have like different variations on the playthrough. Like, hey, when I was playing, this dude got killed the other guy really early, and then when somebody else plays, the dude becomes the king of the country. I don't know, what the
again, I don't
emergent game design.
I don't deny that it's cool, but like, again, right now we have games like Skyrim where characters will go and work in the smithing thing for a bit, then go to the go sit in their chair for a bit, and then go sit at the dinner table, and they'll move back and forth. And it's like, oh yeah, but you don't realize we could have AI that's so detailed, you can actually watch them go brush their teeth and then pick their nose and then sit down and read a book, and they'll remain on the same page of the book they were on last time. It's like, yeah, you could do all of this stuff, but why?
That would be the less interesting stuff. The more interesting stuff would be like they decide to change jobs, switch what they're doing, they move houses, they do bigger things that are somewhat interesting and change things. I don't know that it would make for fun gameplay. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on there, and less on the little stuff. I think a lot of the little stuff people put in, 99% of it still people don't notice. So,
but then exactly that's the problem though. If you do the bigger stuff, suddenly you can't have the stories you want to tell. Like if you've got anybody who's ever tried to design a narrative which has like games that let you kill key characters. How many games do that let you kill a quest giver or a key marker? Because if you do, everything has to change. If you've got a world where an NPC can decide tomorrow he wants to become a fisherman, and he previously was going to be king of the nation, it's like, that's cool, but what do? You have to rebalance the story, and it's like rebalancing a tree, right? And you can do that, but if you do that, what do? You either have to augment the character's personality so they take on the same role so it still vaguely makes sense, or you have to retool the story. And kind of like the butterfly effect thing, if you have a character leave and another character take their place and another character takes their place and everything changes, this is very cool. But as a player in a game trying to get by and make plans and do things, if the world can change by itself by rebalancing consistently, then how can you rely on anything? You go on a quest to go get something for the current king, and by the time you get back, he's given up and, decided to become a horse farmer. It's like, cool, but I got the thing you asked for. It's like, oh, I don't care, I'm not king anymore. So you go to the new king, and the new king's like, actually, I hate you now because I'm part of a different faction that you do. It's like, this is all sounds like fun gameplay, but like, it's not gameplay anymore. It's just you being jerked around from place to place because there's no through line. Narratives are like games are experiences are narratives, and narratives have this structure. I'm not saying you can't put in random elements, but I'm saying that you actually want it to be the small things, not the big things. If it's the big things, you end up with undirected narratives, and that's how you get tedious, open-ended nothing.
I'm too used to MMOs, which are mostly tedious, open-ended nothing.
Yeah, and that's not the goal. I don't want to take the worst parts of MMOs and put them into single-player games, right? That's not the best parts of MMOs are the building your character up, leveling up. The rest of it is limitations. Like, people do that in MMOs because you have to, because you need to have flavor text and lore, but there's no good way to do it at scale. If MMOs could give every person a unique single player narrative while they play, they probably would. They would give you a custom experience with custom. But the difference is that in order to facilitate the kind of grand scale where every third person is the chosen one, you need to facilitate that a certain way. And the idea of taking those same limitations and bringing them in as first party concepts into single player games is just mind blowing to me. Like, I don't want that personally as a player. Again, I'm not saying all of this is bad. I'm saying there's different kinds of games that'll appeal to different kinds of people, and this is not the world I want to live in as a gamer.
I think that's fair. Speaking of gamers, if you haven't entered the giveaway yet, all you got to do is really type in chat. But you can pick a race and class, and you'll show up. And I'll start the battle in, I don't know, probably like 20 minutes or something. And then, for the winner, I figured out what to do for a prize. I'll pop that up in a minute. Let me first go back to where's the Computex window. So there were a couple other things on this AI stuff that I wanted to talk about with Nvidia that was not really gameplay related. I was just kind of curious. I don't know if there's a whole lot we'll dive into, but they did do the generative characters, where it's essentially taking your character, your video from your character live, and then transforming it live into either they had examples of stylized characters, or like totally changing out your face and stuff, and then passing that data along. And they were talking a lot about sending a lot less data and just being able to send over, like, generate the character, basically sending over just the data from what you're saying and your facial movement stuff, and not having to compress all of the video to maximize bandwidth. So they don't have to send like the full video stream. They just send the stuff that the AI needs to recreate the image on the other side. So they're like, I don't know exactly how it works.
Like, reduce latency.
Yeah. So it essentially just don't have to stream HD video anymore. They just have the video and recreate it with AI, which seemed like a pretty big advancement. I assume it's going to be like a thing that gets dropped into Microsoft or Zoom or something, into Teams.
That's going to change the world. Honestly, as weird as it sounds, of all of the kinds of technology that's coming out, that's one of the ones that will secretly have one of the largest effects, and I don't think people realize it. If you ever watch the show Silicon Valley, it's kind of almost like, funnily enough, this technology is kind of what they fake made for Pied Piper as a concept. What they made in that show was this idea of middle out compression, which was this idea that you can have stuff that's hyper compressed and then decompressed on the other end. So you can send large amounts of data and then it still works for simple use cases. What we've got now is the idea that you send small amounts of data and you reconstruct it locally in a way that looks almost as good as the original was. And that means that facilitates, like, the entire world is built on data. The entire world is data centers, passing information, quality bands of internet. The limitations of 4K video and gaming is down to how much information you can squeeze down a pipe. That's all of this is basically limitations on data transmission. And if you can get to a world where you can send less data and reconstitute it, like, people don't realize this is how audio compression works, right? Like, there's the whole concept of sawtooth waves, and the idea that there's a certain
there's a certain distance between the points in waveforms where if I have a point here and a point here, there's only one wave that will actually correctly match those points. And so long story short, when you're doing audio compression, you can compress by sending less points of data because the only way to reconstitute that back into a sensible wave is to walk through the points. So at a broad level, that's kind of how audio compression works. And so it's lossless, right? So you can reconstitute it exactly as was. Now, there's an argument with this stuff where it's not getting the real images. Like this stuff for a game, if you did reconstitute the image, you might have artifacts where something looks like a gun in the distance because it's reconstituted vaguely back and it's not what's actually the real data, and that could lead to issues at like competitive scale games or whatever. But I think for 99.9% of cases, especially video calls, especially the kinds of stuff where people are just transmitting stuff, stream data on companies like Twitch, it's not just useful to us, it's not just less bandwidth for us, it's infinitely cheaper for companies, and it's going to lead to a world where like data centers, you know, far less information, we can increase the 4K resolution on videos that are transmitted at data centers. This is going to be one of those fundamental things that just shifts overnight, and suddenly like everyone is capable of producing far higher resolution videos and streaming it at much cheaper costs. And yeah, this is going to be a big one, I think.
Yeah, and even on the point of all the artifacting, if you look at like the early versions of NVIDIA's DLSS, it was pretty bad. There was a bunch of like artifacting. For those who aren't aware, the DLSS is kind of the like upscaling, their like dynamic learning super sampling that basically uses AI to essentially take a smaller resolution version of your game and kind of expand it into a higher resolution. So, basically your computer processes the lower version, but then you actually see a higher resolution of it. And early on, it only worked with very specific games that they, specifically trained the AI models on. And there was a bunch of, artifacting in some certain situations. But now it's gotten to the point where it pretty much just works really well with any game, and you don't get almost any artifacting at all.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing, because it'll happen passively. It'll be one of those things where there'll be like a button toggle on YouTube, which will be like use AI generation, and suddenly your bandwidth costs will drop to a tenth of what they are, and the video will look roughly the same. It'll just be be interesting.
That's what I was gonna ask. Do you think it's gonna hit YouTube and all of the streaming services really soon, or like one of the first things?
Well, I don't know how soon it'll be, but I do know that like if I was in those fields, this is like literally you can divide your costs by 10, because you're basically, it won't happen overnight, but you can basically offload the image processing to your consumers. It only means high-end consumers can see it, so that's not ideal for everyone at the moment. But as technology improves, if you're on the bandwagon to have this technology baked into your systems early, you'll be the first to benefit from having the savings, because the amount of money these companies pay to ISPs for preferential data transfer and treatment, right? Like they'll be saving millions. So like, yes, I imagine whether or not it's going to be soon is a different question, but I can say for absolute certainty that they want it to be soon, and they will do everything in their power to get that technology in as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of expecting. Path was asking in chat about something we talked a little bit about a minute ago, which was the AI, using AI to fill in pixels for ray tracing. Did you dive into that at all, Jason? Did you see how they're doing that?
Not really. I mean, I've looked at generally like writing very basic ray tracing solutions just to see how the technology works, and I have a rough idea. But I've not looked specifically at pixel fill from that. But yeah, I mean, I guess we kind of talked about this before, but a lot of these technologies are not, like, the technologies aren't new, right? Like, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but the large language models are not new. They've existed long before they became this new hot, sexy topic, but they just weren't good enough. In the same way, people have known about and have used ray tracing for a very long time, but it used to be rendering really crappy little triangles, and it would take like a day to do it. So the technology isn't new. It's just that we're getting better at doing it because we have more processing and we can make faster algorithms and whatever. So yeah, like a lot of these things boil down to, at the end of the day, it's just another graph, or it's just another A-star algorithm. Like, they're all the same thing, but it's done in a way which is exponentially more powerful. And so I don't know the individual details of some of the new technology, but again, like, what we're talking about here is just lossless compression, right? That's what we're really talking about. We're talking about the video stuff. Like, it's all the same concepts. You're just finding different ways to attack the same problem.
So I kind of wanted to talk about one other thing before we I'm non-AI related before I forget, and that's well, no, there's two other things. Why can't I? Okay, I gotta say that
Just one thing when you're looking for that, one thing that I do want to say on the story stuff before we finish. To be clear, I'm not saying AI should not be part of games, and I'm not saying that AI is like not going to be amazingly beneficial. I'm saying that the use case for it has to be hyper targeted. Like I would want to see more AI in games, but the way I would want to see it is hyper specific. I think one of the biggest strengths in games is narratives which resolve sensibly. And so, if you take a game like Mass Effect, and in the same way that for people who've done AI, you can do AI by hard coding a state machine, or you can do AI by using GOP or some other similar goal system, which lets AI, which is A star in that case, find a path through actions to resolve into a senseful collection of things. I think that is the perfect use case for AI in games, where you basically say, the king needs to take over this, the dragon wants to fight them, this is over here, and you use AI to construct narratives. And then you say, what about these other scenarios? What if the king dies? What if the dragon has kids? What if the evil dragon comes from another dimension and kills the main dragon? You can branch out all the story structures and write bits of dialogue that would fill in those linear paths. And then you can structure stories to build a world where the player has more agency, but it's agency along prescripted defined paths by a game designer. So you still get a structured design narrative, but the amount of content normally required to do that is too high. So in a game like Mass Effect, where you have a story you want to tell and you want to build your branches, go for it. I am all for using AI in those cases. The problem I have is the issue where people talk about it for language model style. Let's just put an NPC that like exists for the concept of filling in airtime, and that bothers me because that's the opposing side of it. So I'm not against AI in games. I'm to be very clear. It's just a very different approach. I'm not seeing people use it the way I think it should be used.
So would you be for it in a much more structured scenario, like for example in RTS? So you had AI that was controlling the different armies. It's like, hey, be a semi-aggressive combatant that follows all the rules and fights, or be like a sneaky one.
That would depend on the game.
Able to figure that out.
Yeah, that's
I just think of like you have like a standard, maybe you're playing like a Command and Conquer. I'll go back to one of my favorites, right? And you can just have bots that are controlled by AI that just follow the rules and play without having to cheat, and are just able to be good enough, coming up with different strategies and playing on their own. Do you think that would be a fun and interesting use, or do you think it'll only lead to terrible things, or do you think that you need to kind of like pre-train those and test against them and kind of group them off as like presets of types of bots?
Here's my cynical answer to that, which is games that I used to play as a kid were games like Perfect Dark. Perfect Dark on N64 is probably a good example of a game which took GoldenEye and they basically remade GoldenEye, made it modern setting, and it was a lot sexier. New guns, new cooler toys, and whatever else. But one of the biggest takeaways from that game, and there's also the same thing in Time Splitters, is they had AI in those games. And the AI for the NPCs was really dumb. There was AIs called the Judge, and the Judge would go and kill anybody who ever killed somebody else recently. Or you'd have the Coward, who would always try to kill someone who's weak as opposed to attacking the main person. Now here's the thing. Those are really simple algorithms of like, go after the person in first place, go after the person in last place, go after whatever. But it's really compelling because it's fun and it's reliable. And you can make strategies around knowing that that person's going to come for me because I just killed these two people and I'm now on top or whatever. This is the number one thing that I think people are going to miss, is that there's a certain branch of min-maxing at high-level pro play where you want to have the hardest possible opponents to test your ability. But most players don't want that. Most players want to have a fun experience. And outthinking your opponent is about the most fun you can have in a game. That's why a lot of people prefer player v player, because you actually have a chance to really engage with and outthink your opponent. AI is just better than you. If it wants to be, any AI can be better than you. So the question isn't that. It's a question of how do you make that scenario to allow the player to beat the AI. And I think that the more straightforward the rules, the more the contract between you and the player is clear. And this is where my problem is if you have someone who's like, you're a commander of an army, go and beat the enemy, it'll be cool a couple of times when he does some sneaky strategy and he like sends the whole army halfway around the map to flank you in a way that you never would have thought they'd do. That's really fun the first couple of times. But by the time you're getting your ass handed to you the 10th time in a row because you're like unable to ever strategize around what they're doing because they're objectively able to like be smarter than you, that stops being fun. And so I think there's a fine line. And I think, personally, I think there are scenarios where that would be better. But I think in 99% of cases, reliable AI is almost always the preference. I think people have more fun with reliable AI.
Yeah, I tend to agree on the reliability part, but I am really curious to see kind of how it
I want to
would
see it
work
for sure.
with
I
'cause I just
yeah.
feel like a lot of the time the AI, like it's really hard to get it so that it's anywhere near as smart as a human. So it just ends up with a lot of cheating to make it difficult, which kind of makes it tough. So I wonder if there's like a way to do it where it's still following some parameters and some rules, and also thinking like a slightly less intelligent AI, kind of constrain its ability to. And maybe that just comes down to shrinking its data. I don't know. Oh no, we
Well,
got
well,
battlers showing up off screen.
I think, like, again, I'm not saying it has to be simple. Like, there's some great examples. If you look at the breakdowns of the behavior tree designs for Halo, the AI in that's actually pretty smart. Especially Halo 3, I think, was the first one to really like flesh out their behavior tree system. Like, you don't think about it if you're not watching, but like, it's so fascinating in Halo where the grunts will come out of a ship with an elite. The elite will point in two directions. You can physically watch him do this, and he will send a small army of grunts to go in that direction to pathfind and search the area for you. And if they come back, they will tell him, and if they see you, he'll send more characters that way. If they don't come back, he will send the ones that do return in the direction of the ones that didn't come back to then go figure out what happened. And so, like, this is already happening in games like Halo, and they do things like if you're in cover, they will throw grenades behind your cover to force you out of cover. So I'm not saying things have to be stupid, but I'm saying that if they do these kinds of things and you're paying attention, you can make strategies around, I can't crouch here for too long because I'm on the difficulty I'm at, they are going to start pushing me out of cover with grenades. Like, or even games like The Division, they will send NPCs after you who will run up to you to force you out of cover, and you'll be able to watch them slowly like close the gap because they're trying to push you out of your cover zone. So like, again, I want smart AI. I just wanted smart AI in a way where it's like, I know their playbook, and so I have to outplay them, but I have to think about outplaying them. It's not that I don't even know what their rules are. An AI that's too smart, I literally don't actually know what it's capable of doing, and I cannot make plans in and around that.
Well, but maybe does, with some of these newer technologies, not alone only give us like the best AI, but maybe an AI that can be more fine-tuned to actually come up with its own strategies that, you as a player could actually figure out, and it wouldn't always be the same thing. It maybe could even add more variety to the gameplay, more replayability, because these AIs are coming up with different strategies, and you can that's kind of part of the gameplay, is you kind of like figuring out what their kind of strategies, how they're going about things.
Yeah, and that's what I'm on board for. That is specifically what I want. And that's why, like, again, we're already doing this. And AI, as it is, can facilitate that in 10x ways. That's why, like, things like again, I don't know how much people actually know about what AI already does in games. AI in games, this is not like AI has suddenly arrived and we're going to start putting AI in games. AI is a huge field that has been studied for a long time that has some really clever stuff. Like, if you actually sit and watch NPCs in most games these days, they're already very smart. Horizon, Forbidden West. Like I said, if you have a swarm of the robots and you kill all of them but one, you've now got a single enemy. What does he do? Does he just stand where he used to be? He no longer has any friends? No, he starts walking around the landscape looking for a new group to join, like an animal might. And when he arrives at a new group, he signals what his behavior is, I'm a hunter, and the group will say, do we need a hunter? And if they say yes, he will join the group. If they say no, he will go off and look for another group to join. This is already happening in the games you are playing. And so, yes, I do think using AI to like have more possibilities and more variation is possible. But again, it's not like, oh my God, AI is suddenly going to change the way games work. Games are really smart right now. But the point is, a lot of people don't even know they do this at the moment because that's not what you played the game for. And if you do play the game and you pay attention, it's very cool. But it's not going to change your world because what you play for is the experience you have. Like, the fact that I guarantee I'm explaining features that people don't know are in games they already play kind of proves the point that if you make the AI even smarter, that's not going to change most people's experiences of the game. What you actually need is to make a better experience for the player, and that tends to be leaning more on the narrative side. It's why I focus on narrative, because people say that I'm biased towards narrative games. I am, because it's the most lacking part of games. AI is already a well-studied field in game design. Game mechanics is already a well-studied field in game design, and there's already a lot of really great mechanics out there. And now we've got really good rendering tech and really good visual tech. But the reason why is that kind of narrative still sucks in games. It just does. Like, it's not, the technology isn't there yet. People haven't figured out how to tell good stories and make them interactive. So I'm not focused on narrative because I'm specifically wanting narrative-only games. It's because it's the biggest problem to solve that would add the most to all games. And so I think more energy needs to be put into that area specifically.
And you think it should all be done with AI, right?
Sure.
No, just kidding. Yeah, I can see it kind of. I wanted to jump onto something else, but I can see some of the new tech making it so that people who would be really good storytellers but can't because of the current tech and because of how difficult it is could possibly do that. If it got to the point where they could just kind of talk to the system, tell it what the story is, and somehow it still constrained and confined the game or the game story parts to that. I don't know how that would work, but I wonder if some of the AI stuff could make that easier too. Okay, I want to really quickly tell everybody if you wanted to enter the giveaway, now's the time. Just pick a race and class in chat, type them in. I think I fixed the issue where people were showing up off screen, and yeah, I wanted to, if you guys are up for it, talk a little bit about the VR and AR stuff that's been coming out. So there was the announcement. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. Was this yesterday or the day before? I'm losing track of my days. From Meta about the Quest 3. And then there's the upcoming announcement on the 5th from Apple about their, I don't know the details, but I think it's like some $3,000 VR AR headset, which I assume is going to be crazy too. So it seems like, I think a lot of people just assumed VR stuff was going to disappear and die, but obviously that's not the case. I just kind of assumed it was always going to slowly get better. But now that Apple's getting in, I feel like there's going to be another big kind of gold mine rush for building a bunch of cool VR stuff. And like there's going to be a huge marketplace again, at least temporarily. But I'm curious, have you guys been looking at this stuff much? Are you doing too much VR? Are you excited about the Quest 3 or the Apple stuff, or not at all? Or
yeah, a little bit. I've been doing a little bit of VR stuff for some client work, so I was just kind of in that kind of realm. I haven't really looked into the Quest 3 specifically too much. I just kind of saw the announcements, so it's going to be more powerful and stuff like that. This seems to be kind of like, was it just kind of like a soft announcement of it, and they're kind of having more details of it later. So yeah, I think it's cool. I think more powerful hardware is always fun and everything like that. As far as like the Apple stuff goes, like, I mean, yeah, it sounds like everyone's kind of thinks that this is their big kind of announcements is going to be happening in a couple of days here. And so yeah, we'll definitely see what that all brings.
For various reasons, the short answer to your question of if I'm working with this stuff is vaguely yes, but I don't want to accidentally break any NDAs, so I'm not going to talk about this topic for past this point. So,
cool. But are you excited about the Apple stuff that's coming out? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I'm interested to see more. I'm more interested in see how people are going to perceive this stuff. I've been lucky enough to see a few things, and I have an idea of where a few companies are going with some of their stuff. I can try very carefully, but I do think that I'm more interested in seeing if it's going to match people's expectations and if it's what people want from products. That's more interesting to me because that's the hardest part to telegraph. The idea of like, what do people actually? Would people buy X if it did Y? Right. That's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. But we don't know. We won't know until it comes out.
Yeah, I feel like just because it's an Apple product, it's going to sell out. So it's going to be hard to tell, until there's a restock in a second generation of it or something. If it doesn't sell out, then that would be a big sign. But it seems like Apple stuff, I don't know about over in Ireland, but here it seems like half the country won't even look at shit unless it's got a little fruit on it. Like, I don't want one of those. It doesn't have a fruit on it.
Yeah, and I've heard that the way they're kind of positioning this Apple device is, they want it to be very kind of high end. Like you were saying, it might be like a $3,000 price point, and it probably would be in kind of a limited production run just to kind of, get it in the hands of maybe people who are going to start developing the next generation of VR experiences, whatever that kind of enables. And it's not necessarily for like the general consumer yet at this point, but it's kind of more going to be again for that kind of high end, those people.
Does Apple ever do that though? Has Apple ever released something just for devs and not for consumers first?
Oh no, so not. I mean, it'll still be like publicly available, but I mean, when you're putting it at like a $3,000 price point, I think.
Yeah, the category is prosumer, right? Like it's not for the average consumer.
I think of it as Apple-sumer, right? Apple-sumer with a credit card. Huh. Yeah, I wonder, because I don't know. I think like when I think of Apple stuff, I mean, Microsoft and just about every other company I can see releasing developer versions and doing small runs of stuff, even Google, but I just can't picture Apple doing. Oh yeah, somebody said they had a luxury
what
Apple
they did
Watch.
with the very first generation of the iPhone. Like it was a very limited production run, and it was like only your rich friends were the people who were getting the iPhones.
Yeah, you had to have an AT&T
very
plan
limited, and then people started developing for it, and figuring out kind of all those Gen 1 issues, and then once we get to generations like 3 and 4 of the iPhone, then that's when it starts being like really mainstream.
I don't know. I'm really curious to see. I think what's that, Monday the 5th when they do their announcement. So if it is what everybody's expecting, I think that it's going to cause kind of a big shakeup in VR stuff. Assuming that the headset ends up being good and it is a VR/AR headset like the Quest Pro or something. I really wonder because it seems like with Apple, it's gonna be like some new crazy tech that I wasn't expecting. I don't know.
Well, I will say like the age of VR as a singular thing is kind of over. I would, if I was putting money in things, I'd be putting my stock in MR as a concept, because the broad appeal for that is infinitely larger. It's going to be a game-changing thing. I don't know how soon it'll be. The question is like, I overestimated how quickly VR would take over. It didn't have as much of an impact as I thought it would initially. So I'm careful this time around with my enthusiasm for MR, but I will say the capabilities of mixed reality far outweigh VR conceptually, because the idea of having integrated stuff, because I don't think people realize how much technology is in the sensors for these new tech. Like a lot of this new stuff allows you to do things which are, again, you use sensors to calculate data, then you pass the data to AI models to estimate things, and then you use the estimations to do whatever it is you're doing, which means you can theoretically do things without information that you assumably need. A silly example of this is the guy who made the camera that has no lenses, where the camera just takes sensor data from the internet and then generates a picture, the position you are from GPS. Now that's a silly example, but think about this from a sensor perspective. If you can have smartwatches and smart controllers and stuff, and they're tracking positions and rotations and various different data points, and you apply that data points to a virtualized model with a full estimated rig of sinews and skin and whatever, which can estimate movement potentials and whatever else, you can conceivably track things you can't see. You can do a lot of interesting stuff that is like in the realm of broad. It's hard to describe what I mean, but like the point is, the technology for MR is going to lead to things that are, there's more research potential in that direction that'll lead to very interesting tech. Like I always thought that the idea of super thin glasses was kind of impossible, because like where would you put all of the data? But the trick is with AI, you don't need to put the data. You just basically get enough rough sensor data, send it off to the cloud somewhere, and it comes back and goes, oh, based on your height, your weight, your position, I presume your body would move in this capable ways, and therefore I can see the rough corner of an edge of a finger, so your hand is probably in this position, even though it can't see it. It's like that stuff to me is going to be very powerful. I'm kind of curious to see how fast the technology catches up.
Yeah, me too. I like Lem mentioned that. Do you think that the Apple stuff is going to be more AR and kind of like the Google Glass? I mean, I hope it's not like
100%.
Google
Yeah.
Glass. I hope it's more like more like my dream is that it's like the HoloLens with just a piece of glass, but gives more of a feeling of like a Vive Pro or something, or Oculus Pro. I mean, where you can see through, or even I can't even get my words out. An index or something, where it gives like a really good see-through, pass-through, but it's super light, like Google, like actual sunglasses, which I think is, yeah. My guess is probably going to be more on the light end, less on the display, but I really don't know. Like I'm, kind of all over the place. I also want to know what the hell it's going to be named. So
Yeah.
Johnny, there was a comment up earlier that I starred, and I just wanted to make sure to call it out. It said, "Hey Johnny, love your latest dots tutorial, except for the hacky pit. Please update as soon as you get the best practice for that." Do you know what that was?
I think that might be. There was like some hacky bits that I had to do to kind of bridge the gaps between ECS and mono behavior stuff. Oh, I think it was like I had to get a reference to an entity from the game object side, and I kind of did a little hacky workaround for that. But yeah.
Oh, okay. Something small.
Yeah.
Have you hold on, I'm gonna switch over to the giveaway battler real quick. Let everybody enter and then kick it off. And then we'll I wanted to ask you a couple questions about the LTS. First though,
Sure.
prize for it. So I was trying to come up with something, and I remembered I'm doing this workshop on the 10th. So I am going to get a free code and give it to the winner. So if you want to check it out, I'll drop the link up there. It's something I'm doing with the GameDev TV guys. I talked to Rick, and they've got this format for these workshops to do kind of in-depth stuff that's all condensed, and it's going to be essentially like all of a Saturday going over programming, architecture stuff, a lot of solid principles and how they do and don't apply in game development, and a couple of the stories and things I've kind of learned along the way. Anyway, you can check that out. I'm going to give one away to whoever wins, though, in a second. So I'll wait until we have 50 people entered. Looks like we're at 47 right now, and then kick it off. And whoever wins, we'll get a code for a free one. I'll just have to go get a code for a free one real quick first. Anyway, I was curious. Did you guys check out or try out the new LTS? Have you upgraded? Are you now using it, or are you still holding back?
I haven't quite downloaded it, but I will be using it very soon, probably even this weekend. But yeah.
Probably the same. Yeah. I don't ever use it for, I don't upgrade client projects because there's too many people. You have to like facilitate, make sure everyone upgrades at the same time. So I tend to download it over the weekend. I download whatever the LTS is, play with it myself, get a handle for whatever changes, and move on. So the short answer is no, but I also will this weekend.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I grabbed it when it came out to just play around. It's essentially the same as what I've been using, though, because I tend to work in the tech streams. I very rarely stick with an old LTS build unless I have something that's super vital. I don't have a lot of client projects anymore, so I don't have to worry about an upset client when all of a sudden their build doesn't work. So I usually just go like commit, upgrade, let's try out the alpha and see if it works. Just constantly trying to stay on the top of that. I wonder, everybody in chat, are you guys using the LTS, or are you using the what I guess what would they be in now? Is it Tech Stream for 23, or is it still alpha?
Tech Stream for 23, I don't believe is out yet. Yeah,
that's what I thought. It was still like beta or alpha. Yeah, I wonder if everybody is upgrading. Oh, LTS is having an issue with. Let's see, what does this say? LTS is having an issue with one of the installed shaders. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, I noticed somebody else in comments mentioned that they were having a problem with LTS and a couple of their asset packs that they were using too. Kind of curious. Oh, have you guys tried out the water? Immersion was asking about that.
No.
I played with it a little bit. It looks beautiful, but I don't have anything to put it in. So it didn't go beyond that. All right, I'm gonna kick off this battle and let's see who wins. I'll watch my start button not work. Let's see, help. Let's move this out of the way and I hit start down here. There we go. Oh, that's right. So I was messing with this and I haven't turned off the there's a camera script that I added yesterday when I was live streaming right here. I just turned that off. And it was just showing the people. I think
I caught that too late. I saw you were going live and said I'll jump on with people, and I'm like, oh, I missed that. Like I would have jumped in, but I was busy with work stuff. And I missed the bat signal, unfortunately. So.
Oh, so yeah, I just yesterday I really wanted to do a little bit of setup stuff and make sure that things were going to work over here, kind of get things tested out. I ended up moving things around. So like throughout that stream, you see, like I had to stop and like move tables around and adjust a whole bunch of stuff. Like, it was my organizing stream. Okay, so this camera view is not showing whoever's on that far right side. Did they die? I'm just trying to move it around. That's the one thing I don't like about Restream. It makes it really hard to get like a window in position. There we go. There's the battle. Let's see who's up. Oh, I'm in this battle because I typed first, I think. Oh, wait, maybe not. Because I did reload it. All right. Lots of people fighting. So yeah, with the LTS, is there anything in 2022 that you guys were excited about? I mean, Johnny, I assume the dots part. Maybe did you hear about that? Or they did something with dots?
I wrote a blog post or something. Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting that yeah, it was like a week or two ago where the official non-experimental, non-pre-release version of ECS was released, but it wasn't technically compatible with like any version that Unity had out there because it said you needed to be using the 22 LTS. So now that 22 LTS is out, everything is official. So it's yeah, definitely exciting times.
Nice. So
yeah,
are you?
I'm excited to see people work on it simply because again I think it's one of those things about developers. The best developers are the lazy ones, and I'm extremely lazy. So what I like to do is
You must be the best.
yeah, exactly. I like to wait until other people play with the toys and come up with stuff. And so now that it's open, I've completely like not looked at shader stuff that much. I've not looked at dot stuff. I've kept informed to see what's available, but I've not really been diving into it. But now I can let people actually make stuff with it, and then I can steal all the learnings from it. Now that it's actually, because that's always been my problem, right? It's that it's when you're on the bleeding edge. It's called the bleeding edge for a reason. You're bleeding out if you're trying to do stuff on it. And I again, I've been there in past lives. I've been the guy on the edge of the VR stuff or whatever, and I don't have the energy for that level of like constantly chasing after stuff. So yeah, now I'm actually excited because it means that people like yourself can make stuff and like it'll be evergreen, or at least closer to evergreen, to the point where I can now watch those tutorials and not feel like when I come back to it in a month's time, it'll look different than whatever the video told me to do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I even just put out a video today where I was doing kind of like showcasing a project that I made for the Ludum Dare 53 game jam. So I'm not sure if you guys were kind of following along what I did with that, but me and another guy who runs the YouTube channel Logic Projects, he uses the Bevy game engine, which uses the Rust programming language, and it's kind of like a entity component system type setup as well. So basically we had the idea of both participating in the Ludum Dare game jam. We would make the same game off of the same idea, but using our two different game engines to create it. So yeah, it was a ton of fun.
I saw the beginning of it. I didn't see the end. How did it go?
Went really well. Here, I'll show you the video that I put up today.
Rust is one of those things that's on my to-do list. I normally try to avoid fad languages or fad new technologies, but Rust is one of those things where I'm like, okay, no, Rust is going to take over. Rust is pretty spicy.
People seem to like it, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I'm gonna have to add it to my list at some point.
Okay, we got to open this in Chrome. I forgot that Microsoft's browser can't play videos apparently.
Yeah, so we basically recreated, we made a clone of the game Vampire Survivors. Obviously, this is Vampire Survivors gameplay. This is not my game here.
You
But
didn't make this for a game jam. Crazy.
yeah, so the idea is we basically, so the theme was delivery. So we kind of wanted to make like a Vampire Survivors type game. And then we were like, how do we make a game off of the theme delivery? So we kind of came up with the theme of pizza delivery. So you play as like a pizza delivery guy, and your weapons are themed off of different pizza toppings. So it's just a fun, silly game. I think if you go, should be like maybe the next section over is where I kind of compare it. There's a bunch of the AI art I generated.
Comparing final projects. Okay.
If you've, by the way, as a nod to the book Snow Crash, you should totally name your main character the Deliberator, because that's who that in the book Snow Crash. That's this guy with a samurai sword who drives a fast car who delivers pizzas. At breakneck speed.
Missed opportunity right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is Matthew's game right here. If you scroll back a little bit, you can see mine. So this is the Bevy game, and then this is my game here. So yeah, ended up pretty cool. Have 3 different weapons that you can use, and I think his did as well. So yeah, the game. Oh, here's the results. You pause it on here. This is crazy how close the results are for the 2 games. Like, if you look at most of the categories, they're within like 1 to 2% of each other.
Yeah, that's what happens. You make the same game. I guess it doesn't matter what engine you build it with.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. 2.85 and 2.825. Nice. So you have a lot of fun with that. It looks like it was probably a blast.
Oh yeah. It was so much fun. Yeah, we had a good time.
Now, is something like this super easy to put together in dots nowadays?
I'd say for the most part, like I was pretty confident in my abilities, and there wasn't anything that was like really crazy, particularly challenging. There was like one thing that was like I didn't really have a good kind of solution figured out for. I kind of talked about that in the video a little bit, like kind of dealing with the upgrade system, how I wanted the upgrade system to work. But I mean, it was pretty straightforward. The thing is, there was just like a lot of code that I needed to write, even just for the kind of simple systems. There ended up being like a ton of scripts. That was kind of like one thing that I mentioned in my Game Dev Guild talk. It's like, even though I made that just simple little sample project, it ended up having like 50 scripts. And so, yeah, for this game jam, there was like just a lot of things that I had to write for it. Even
that's always the hard part, right? Like people often ask, is it easy to make game of type X in engine Y? And it's like, if you take the question out of game dev and say, is it easy to do a thing I've never done before? It's about as easy as your ability to do the thing. If you have experience doing similar things, it'll be easier. If you don't, it won't. And so, to your point, it's not really about either the engine or the task. It's if you've done similar things and you have rough experience in the area, it's going to be easier for you. And so I imagine each of us having done vaguely, we've done character controllers, we've done some level stuff, that the hard part stops becoming the like putting it together. It's more the like just the sheer amount of work required to like build all of the pieces to get that stuff in place.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I need to dive back into dots sometime soon. I just need to find an actual project to do with it. Like Lem's waiting for Code Monkey's video. I don't know if that was on dots or LTS. I saw he had an LTS video though that was really good. I think dropped yesterday. I don't know if he's gonna do a dots one soon. I think he did one somewhat recently though. I've been watching his little. He's been doing these little short clips on YouTube and community posts, trying to get his camera set up with the green screens and stuff.
I saw that. Yeah, I left a comment on the. He was asking about teleprompters, and I was like, okay. Pro tip: you need to get a Parrot caster teleprompter. It's really good. It's really cheap. So much easier. And so.
Oh yeah, so it's definitely the best. You just stare right at it. You get a little controller, go up and down. Yeah, it's definitely great. Let's take a question or two while this battle finishes up. So there was a dots question. Do you find the way that systems are constructed makes them more or less reusable between projects? That's a good question. On dot stuff, is stuff reusable at all, or is it like you just kind of write it and you rewrite it next time?
Yeah, it's definitely reusable. Just because I mean the whole nature of data-oriented design is everything is just kind of separate. So you have kind of your basic data stuff, and then your logic is kind of separate from that. And yeah, I mean you can kind of reuse it in a lot of different ways within your one single project. Like I kind of talked about in this Vampire Survivors game that I made, how once I made the system for the player to damage the enemies, I was able to just kind of drag and drop that over to the player. So now the enemies could damage the player as well. So there's like things like that that are kind of all within the same game that you can translate over pretty easily. And yeah, same thing project to project. I've definitely pulled systems from example projects that I've created for things in my videos, and just had to maybe do a little bit of tweaking to get it to work in that specific project. But yeah, overall, it's been pretty easy to move things from one project to another.
Oh, nice. I was kind of wondering about that. But it does make sense because you could probably just take a system and then do a small modification because your systems are so separated out. It should make it kind of more modular than typical object-oriented stuff, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. Again, the systems are just basically looking for specific types of data components. So as long as you have those data components set up in that way, or your system is, looking for whichever data components, then yeah, you're pretty much good to go.
Nice. I think that that makes a lot of sense. I got another question I want to ask to both of you real quick. Well, we're down to the last 3 fighters. We're going to be down to the last 2 in a second. So right after this battle, I'll ask you guys both the question. I'm just kind of curious about something I'm doing a video on, and I haven't had a chance to ask many people about. Okay, we got the last 2 fighters. We got JT and Frank. And again, I'm just going to get a code for the winner for this workshop I'm doing with the GameDev TV guys. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. Whoever wins, either JT or Frank, will have a free code as soon as I get that code. And it looks like it's going to be Frank Skywalker. Oh, maybe not. Oh, it's close one. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, okay. It would have been funny if he came back. All right. Well, congratulations, Frank. I'll
Nice.
send you a code. Please send me an email. It's jason@game.courses. And then I will send you back the code, hopefully tonight. I'll try to get it as quick as possible. All right, let's remove that window. And then I want to ask you two a quick question. It's not a very hard question, but it's just kind of a more general open question. And it's about, so I was putting together a video on interfaces in game development in C#. Just a really simple one. I'm kind of going through some old videos that I'd done and looking at ones that I feel like kind of loosely cover what I wanted to talk about, but didn't really go deep enough, and making some stuff that kind of goes a lot deeper into when, why, and how to do different things. And I was really curious for you two. I've been asking a couple people, but not many. How often do you find yourself both using and creating new interfaces? I assume story is going to be more than the average, but I wonder where you guys are at with that. Because I found that, just as a little bit of pretext, I used to write probably 5 to 10 times more interfaces than I do now. And yeah, it's just kind of left me thinking. Like, I wonder how and when do you use interfaces when you're doing game development stuff specifically, not outside the game dev. So outside game development, it's like my default.
Yeah, I mean, for most of the dot stuff that I'm doing, don't really have much of a need to create my own custom interfaces. So it's not something that I do that often. But yeah, I mean, from time to time I will. So it's not something that I've been doing too much with the dots programming. But
can you think of an example of one of the like recent ones that you would have done, or a common one that you do?
I think I might have done like one in the Vampire Survivors clone game that I did, where it was kind of like I ended up having to use kind of some object-oriented programming stuff for the whole upgrade system. How I had to get that to work. That actually might have not been an interface, but anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, this is where I get to. Like, I start to think about it, and like the scenarios end up less and less when I get into my game dev ones. But there are still some. There are definitely some really solid use cases. But Jason, as I
you can imagine I'm going to be slightly different on that. I'm going to say,
yeah.
I'm boringly academic with this stuff, which is I look at it from. I look at how I work, and then I try to establish why I work that way, and then I try to reverse engineer rules that make sense around it. Like, one of my favorite things from the Bob Martin clean code stuff is when he talked about the indirect proportionality of names of functions. When people say, what should you call a method? It's very hard to come up with a good idea for, like, what is the rule to tell somebody how you should name your variables? But the general idea that the higher up you go, the shorter the method name, the lower down you go, the longer the method name, is something that scales well. Like, the more specific it is, the more detailed, the higher. So I try to find those kinds of things. And so, to the point of interfaces, my answer is, I notice I follow a curve, which is, if it's a game jam or prototype, I actually use a lot of interfaces, despite what people might think. Because if you use a lot of interfaces in a game jam or a very quick project, you can lean heavily on what is probably bad for scalability, but really good for prototyping, which is things like command pattern and strategy pattern. You can make 50 different variants of jetpacks and shooters and bullets and guns, whatever. And these aren't as friendly, but they're really quick, that if you do know how to compose things using factory patterns, generators, and whatever, if you can write the code pretty quickly, which I've done a million times, you can make really quick iterative prototypes where you can pass in curves which estimate loot table drops to generate new types of enemies, and you can spin up 500 different variants of enemies using weighted likelihoods for stuff very quickly, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is saying these interfaces with these weighted likelihoods into this system spit out these enemies. So I use them a lot when it's really quick prototyping ideas. When I don't know what's fun yet, I use them a lot. As a project matures, I tend to ditch almost all of them, and I just write the code to solve the actual problem. And once I write the code to solve the actual problem, the truth is interfaces are earned. Abstraction is not something you should aim to start with. Abstraction is something that happens once a boundary line has been established itself. So in a real project, quote unquote, I tend to not use many interfaces. I just tend to write systems, as in, like, what's a requirement, write the requirement, move on. And then over time, a requirement requires an interface to continue development. And so I'll add one in as I need it. And then finally, by the time you get to the other end of the spectrum, for really big projects, I'll use a lot of interfaces again, because now it's a different problem, which is if you're doing test-driven development of stuff which is very systemic, you start with interfaces and you can design by contract. You can then build in things like, I don't know where we're storing our data yet. So I might do something called a configuration interface. And configuration, I will write implementation which goes to player prefs, and I will work with that for 70% of the lifetime of the project. But when the time comes for a real implementation, I can swap it out for JSON, and it has no negative effects. An example in a recent project I did is Fmod. We were switching to Fmod, but we weren't ready to switch to Fmod. So for prototyping, I used the default Unity audio, but I wrapped it in my own audio interface. And then when the time came for me to change Fmod, I could do that. And every system written by every developer on the team was deferring to an audio system, which returned an audio reference. And they could set variables on an audio reference. I could pipe those variables directly into Fmod, and they never knew they were using Fmod, right? So long story short, I use interfaces a lot when I don't know what's fun yet and I'm starting a project. I don't use them much when I'm building a project. I kind of know what it is and I'm sort of building towards it. And then I use them a lot again when I'm building a system that's very well defined and I'm structuring it out through interfaces.
Now, I like the refactoring one too, because that's actually a scenario that I've done a couple times and actually didn't even think about. But swapping stuff out at low levels, a lot of the time what I've done in the past is add in an interface there, replace the implementation with the abstract of the interface, and then swap it out so that it works. I feel like it makes the swap easier, because then you know that you haven't broken things with your calls before on the other side, and then you can swap it right in.
But it's also freeing. Like, here's the thing. Like, when people think of interfaces, they just think, oh, you're adding abstraction, you're making it more complicated. But here's a really simple example. You could have an input box where it's like type a command to, imagine you had a game where you're typing in commands and you're like driving something with commands, you're typing into a text box. That's fine, but you might decide later, wouldn't it be cool if I type it into the text, or if I speak into the mic and it types into the text box? if you write your code to a text box, you now have to, the development time that it takes to decide to now integrate voice commands into text to then write the text into the text box, that's a lot of extra work. But if the abstraction layer is a system which takes a string provider and the default string provider is text box string provider, you can write a system which reads the text from a text file externally, from a microphone, from ChatGPT, from whatever else, and then the iterative time on prototyping new ideas is quite quick. So why that's important is if I'm working on a client project and someone says, wouldn't it be cool if X did Y? I'm like, I can do that right now. Like while we're talking in a Zoom call, I can write a class called XY Doer, grab the API online, write the few lines of code and drop it in. It's probably too many layers of abstraction for a real system. It probably costs some CPU performance I wouldn't do in a real thing, but I can quickly prototype, we can get feedback, we can get ideas going, and then once we establish what we actually want to do, I can sit back, reevaluate, and design it much tighter with less abstraction layers. So a lot of people think abstraction layers just makes code more complicated. It does, but like the thing about abstraction is you can always go back. You can always just undo whatever level, the whole point of source control plus thing. So I will use the interfaces as an exploratory tool. And then when I know what I want, I'll just kind of stop and go, okay, let's rewind like five layers of abstraction. Now we know what it should look like. We can just take the bits of code we like and then build a robust system, switch to using hash maps and hash tables and make it everything super efficient, but then just swap it out in place because it matches the same contract as the previous thing, you know?
Yeah, so I think there's a question in chat that's loosely related to this. Will be my last follow up on this. I'm curious when you're doing this. You said that you do a lot of interfaces kind of early on, but where do you decide what things to do this for and what things not to? Do you just do this like for every bit of code that you write, for every text box, or do you just go like, oh yeah, obviously this text box is nobody's going to do anything with this, or these things that are more likely? Like, do you kind of like just do some judgment calls along the way based on what you've seen in the past that people might recommend, or do you just try to go as broad as possible? I guess I'm kind of avoid wasting time too. So that
but that's the thing is you don't have to do it all in one jump too, right? Like a lot of people think it's one thing. I don't jump to that solution. So example of this is I really should do a video on precisely this because I can demonstrate it very clearly in steps. So for example, if I wanted to make a game where I press spacebar and I shoot, the line of code I would literally write is input.getKeyDown spacebar, and I make a method called shoot, and in the method called shoot, I would write pew pew. That is the most baseline. I've proved the feature that it kind of works. Then I would wrap the function where I wrote input.getKeyDown, and I would make a Boolean property called should fire. So now I've moved it one layer of abstraction away where it's called should fire. And so now if should fire, shoot. And then in shoot, I would make a thing called shoot debug message, and I would move the text into that. So now if should fire shoot, and then shoot fires debug text.execute. Then I would swap out debug text.execute to spawn cube and fire with rigid body. So now that swaps to that. And then as it builds up, I'll like, actually, I don't want both input and firing in the same script. So I will take input and I will make something called input manager, and I'll make an implementation of it called default unity input manager. And I would swap my should fire with input manager.should fire, or input manager get key should fire .pressed, or whatever. Now I've moved it one more layer out, and so as the project grows, I extract a layer and I just do it organically over time. I don't.
And you add the interface right then, like as soon as you pull out that class and you start to connect them, you're not hard referencing any input manager class at all. You're just going straight to an interface as soon as you have to interact between classes.
As soon as I know it's a system, as soon as I know it's like, okay, like I have now decided input as a broad concept is a part of my game, or audio as a broad concept is a part of my game. So I'll make a thing called audio. Now, the implementation of the first contract is just going to be audio play and a string. And the first implementation is just going to be audio source dot play at point thing and whatever. And I'll just do that. And then later on, I might decide, oh, actually play needs a vector 3 for position. So then I'll add an overload, which adds a vector 3. So it's not about writing like the mistake people make with interfaces is they try to sit down and make the ultimate interface, and then they screw themselves with like over complexity. Like my interfaces are often boringly one method in it. The point isn't to create the right answer. Like the contracts will change frequently over the course of the project. The point of the contract is to say, I have established there's two systems. There is audio, or three systems in this case. There's audio, there's input, and there's weapons. And broadly what I'm saying is if should fire, audio.play fire sound, weapon.fire. I've now got 3 systems with 3 contracts with 3 clearly defined relationships to each other. I don't know what they do yet. I don't know who the implementation is for each one. But over time, as I've written out the code, and again, I start with the implementation. I don't start with the abstraction. I start with if input.get key down, blah, blah, blah. But as I slowly built and changed my mind, it said, what if it's not spacebar? What if it's mouse press? Okay, I make something called mouse press, and I swap out the should press to mouse press. And organically, these contracts build up out of the dependencies. So yeah, I basically go by the Grady Bush description of good code should read like well-written prose. So I read my code and say, does it say my intent? If I should do this, otherwise do this thing. And over time, it's just an interaction of systems. So I don't pre-design systems, I just write code. Over time, systems appear, and I extract out the systems that appear. There is obviously experience in that. It takes time to figure out how to do it. But the short answer is write the code you wish existed. Like just, it should read like what you're trying to do. If it doesn't read like what you're trying to do, if you're seeing the word vector3.x multiplied by divided by, it's like, what are you really trying to do? I don't know, place on floor. So why isn't it called place on floor? It might be doing raycasts and doing stuff and have positions and have offsets, but none of that matters. What you're trying to do is place on floor. I did a grid map system recently, and I wanted to get neighbors. How do you get neighbors in a hex grid? Well, you could do a raycast, get a calculation, do the various stuff. I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do all that. I just want to say get neighbors. So I wrote got neighbors. And then later on, I changed it, and I was like, actually, no, what? Raycast is not ideal, because what if the grid doesn't have a raycast? So I switched to a plane, and I made a plane, and then I now calculate the position on the plane by doing a cast against the plane defined on a space. So again, I can change the code, but the contract remains the same. Get neighbors on grid, right? So I don't know how useful that is, but it's basically, I approach everything the exact same way. It's the same process for each.
Yeah, it sounds really similar. I think the key difference, though, is that you seem to be making interfaces kind of preemptively, assuming that you're going to need to swap out things. And I mean, I can see your input system, especially on the types of things you work on, very likely that you will need to swap that. And I found that lately, I tend to not make the interfaces until I make that other abstraction, because I found that so often I would have interfaces where there was just never another abstraction needed, where there was a thought that maybe it was going to happen, but it or another implementation, sorry, it just never ended up happening, and the interface just added a little bit of extra complexity. And that adding the interface when that came up was about the same, because it just the classes still had the same methods and the same general interface as the interface itself, the technical interface.cs. But it would just kind of add that part on later once the new implementation was there. So I
agree, but so here's my little asterisk on that. I 100% agree. And if I was writing for myself, I wouldn't need to write abstractions for things that I don't know, that I don't plan on abstracting. I agree with you there. But here's my little asterisk. Because I work on client projects, I never know what someone's going to come back for as a change. And so a little hack I figured out for myself is if I write an input system and I write a, whatever, if press spacebar, fire weapon, like you can easily, if you have, I guess it comes down to like project management and empathy, right? If you've ever worked in a project management role, you know what it's like to ask questions, because think about it. Somebody wants a project made and they go to a programmer. They don't know how to program. They're hiring you because they don't know how to do it. And so they're going to have things they want. Wouldn't it be cool if the bombs exploded when they bounced off? They're going to have these kinds of ideas and they won't know how to articulate them to you. And so your job is going to be understanding the requirements and converting them into code. So what I like to do is I just play that role in my head. I would write if spacebar, fire gun. And I pretend now I'm a product owner coming to me saying, oh, that's really cool, but I'd love to click my mouse. And I go, okay, well, if they came to me and said that, could this code support that change? And the answer is no. And so I would write a quick test implementation. So I do the same as you're saying, but I will manifest those 3 really quickly. I will write 3 quick ones. I will write button press, mouse press, and shout at mic volume level greater than 10 or something. Just 3 dumb implementations to say, I've now proven that if this changes, I've written implementations that would support that change. So I will force myself into those very scenarios if it's a client project, so that by the time the real client requests come in, I've already covered my edge cases. I did this recently with a grid system I wrote where they came back and changed the shader out from under me, and the shader had all of these different properties. And I'm like, good, because I knew you'd do that. So I built a layer called tile renderer, and it just takes in each tile in a for loop, pre-calculates all the positional data, and then you just populate a property block and draw it. Because I knew the property block would change, I didn't know what properties would be on it, and so I gave one place where we could change all the properties in like 5 minutes, and it doesn't break the rest of my code, right? So just preempting, and I'm not preempting randomly, I'm preempting based on experience working with clients and going, okay, how do people tend to break my stuff? And I just put myself in their shoes and I ask for the features they're probably going to ask for. So again, I agree with you, but I think you can bypass that a little bit by forcing yourself into the scenarios that are likely to come up if you've been in there before, you know?
That makes sense. You're going from that past experience side. Sorry, I keep bouncing you guys' heads around. Anyway, I've got to get running in just a few minutes, so I wanted to tell everybody quickly to go join Jason Story's Discord, and of course, I assume they're already subscribed to Johnny's channel, but if not, make sure that you go grab Turbo Makes Games. It's linked in the description. Go subscribe and check it out. Johnny, what have you been making lately? You said that the Game Jam video, and then are you doing one on the Dots 1.0 release, or have you just done one of those?
Yeah, so I've been doing I got some tutorial videos coming up, and I'm gonna do one probably in I think about 2 weeks. It'll be going up on kind of going more into Dots 1.0, and just I wanted to make a video about like, should you use Dots now that it's out, kind of thing. So
that is I think a perfect one. Yeah, like should you and when you should use it. And yeah, I think that would be perfect.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
a lot
for
of people ask like, should I be doing this? And I'm like, maybe it really, I feel like there are definitely scenarios where it makes a lot of sense and some where it doesn't. And I think if you can kind of spell all those out with actual facts, it'd make a lot more sense. Cool. And what about you, Jason?
I've got a fun small side project I'm working on that people might be vaguely interested in. I'm trying to get better at something called atomic note taking and sort of stream of consciousness ideas. And so it's not for anything. I'm not selling any product here, but it's just purely my own little project if anyone's interested. I'm using Obsidian to basically do a stream of consciousness thought thing, and I'm going to try to write a couple thousand words every day and just sort of build this up into a network of random ideas. If anybody's interested in vaguely how my brain works, this is probably the closest you're going to get to seeing the various connections. So yeah, just a fun thing I'm going to try to do because work stuff has got me pretty busy on the actual work side, and so I need something that's not work as a counterbalance to keep myself sane. So this is my little hobby project for myself.
Interesting. So is this? I'm looking at it right now. Is it all? Oh, okay. I see. Got it. I'm gonna have to dig through this and start reading your mind. Okay. I've got it up here on another tab. I just linked it in chat for a while.
If you hit the little icon in the corner too, there's a little box that says interactive graph. If you hit the like little triple dot thing, it brings up this crazy graph where you can actually see all the connections and how they all sort of tie together.
Oh, cool.
nice.
Oh wow, yeah, that's neat. So nobody else can see this because I got it on the other screen. Let me just drag it over real quick.
And that's that's about a day and a half of me thinking about this. I'm going to try to do this every day for a couple of months and see, or at least 1 month, and see how big this thing gets. So.
That's yeah. It seems kind of cool. It seems interesting. I want to try this out. There it is. Now it's full screen. You can see Story's mind.
Yeah, so various topics in there, from project management to game design to note taking, and as I randomly come up with various different things, I'll slowly add more.
Grandpa Simpson was right. There you go.
Yep.
Dead on. Very cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there and then be back next week. If you're not subscribed, make sure that you do that now. I think next week, if you're up for it, I really want to do a talk about clean code. So maybe we can have a discussion about that if we can get everybody's timing right. I want to get your eye on and you and chat about clean code and the Martin Fowler stuff and a couple other things that I think would be interesting discussions. But for now, I guess we'll say bye. Thanks again for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share. Go check out Johnny's channel and check out all the links and stuff down below. You already missed the spring sale, but there's other cool stuff down there. All right. See y'all later.
Later, everybody.